Michigan survives Wake Forest down at Little Caesars Arena in just game 2 on the season. And welcome in. Exciting times down in the city of Detroit. Maybe too much excitement for you as Michigan hangs on, survives, however you want to put it yourself. It looked like they at first were going to win this one going away, and it looked like they were going to lose for the longest time. Ended up getting down to the nitty gritty where you had to make some plays, and they kind of, I don't know if they fell into it. It wasn't perfect execution down the stretch in regulation or in overtime to get the victory. But when you find a way to win, ended up being Elliot Cadeau getting fouled on the pass. He split a pair of free throws, and then Michigan made a defensive stand at the in the final seconds in overtime, and were able to win this game with a final of 85-84 in OT at the LCA. This was a game where, when I look at all the players, and I'm going to give you all of the numbers for U of M individually and what they did as a team. But when I just take a look and think about this game, I don't think anybody from Michigan, with the exception of Ade Mara, really had a good game. Now, we'll look through it. I say that Roddy Gale, at the end of regulation, had a key steal, and he hit a big three with 1:44 to go. So making a big play down the stretch, you could put him into, you're going to have a couple guys that, that needed to step up if you're going to win a ball game like that. But Mara was the one. And, Mara, you've watched him in some exhibition games, and then these 2 games here. The headline in the offseason was Yaks. And then also in the offseason, because he played for Team USA in the summer, was Morez Johnson Jr. It was like those were the 2 guys that were going to lead this team. The youngster, Trey McKinney, in the opener, led Michigan in minutes and was 6 of 8 from downtown. He stole some of the headlines. And Mara was good in the opener, but tonight he was a big-time factor defensively and offensively. The numbers were incredible for him when you look through it. 18 points, 14 boards, 6 assists, and 5 blocks. And his presence down low is big time. I mean, he's 7'3", 7'6" reach, maybe just a little bit short of that, but he knows how to use his size defensively. And it's one of those things where, you're the other team and you go in there, it's like he's affecting the game. And, having said all of that, I mean, they were going to him. He missed a hook in regulation. He threw another one away. So yeah, it wasn't one. If you watch Michigan, if somebody had watched Michigan for the first time, I might say this team's not a Final Four team. This team's not going to be number 1 at some point this year. They got a lot. What about Yaks and all this? And there's a point to that. I mean, this was a game that they was slipping through their fingers. They hung on. They found a way. When you find a way, everything's a lot different. I mean, Wake hits that last second shot, and we're sitting around. The conversation is that Cadeau needs to finish better, and Yaks, what's going on with him? Morez Johnson Jr., foul trouble, 3-point shooting. All of those are the kind of things. And no, you still, when you get a win, you look at all of those and you say, oh, well, what do? You clean it up, or, you work on that. And it's not a funny thing. It's how things work in sports. I mean, it's a make a shot, miss a shot, get a win, don't get a win. It doesn't, send everything away, but you're not sitting around, harping on it and talking about all the things that showed up here, and you're wondering like, wow, what the heck was going on here? So that's pretty crazy how it all went through. If you're out there and you're watching this, you can always comment in on what you thought of the game. We'll take you through it. We'll give you all the numbers. We'll look ahead to the schedule. And that reminder that after every Michigan basketball game, we fire up the cameras and we talk about it here on the Maize and Blue review. And if you're listening to this or watching it after the fact, I always tell folks, if you like the conversation with Michigan and Michigan basketball and Michigan football and Michigan sports, that's what we're doing all day, all night. Over on the Maize and Blue review, you go there, go to on3.com and hit that subscribe button. You get instant access, and you're talking about this game. You're talking about Michigan Northwestern and football coming up and everything else under the sun that's Maize and Blue. It's a lot of fun, and I guarantee you will like it. Well, for this game, Michigan in the first half, they're feeling both teams, feeling each other out, seeing how it was going to play out, and then Michigan towards the end of the half, it just looked like their size, their athleticism, their skill, and also the fouls. It was going, Michigan's way. At the break, Wake Forest had committed 16 fouls, and Michigan just 5. The Wolverines went to the free throw line 20 times, and they had a 13-point lead at the break. And you're thinking, all right, this is going to be this is all right. They don't even look that great, and yet, they've got a 13-point lead. But then the second half came about, and Wake Forest flipped the script. They tied it with under 9 to go. They took the lead at 8:20. They were up by 7 with 5:46 to play, and Michigan went ice cold from downtown. You say, well, how do you lose a double-digit lead? That's how. You don't make any threes. They were 0 for 12 when Trey McKinney looked like he nailed one, and I think it was Benetti said, hey, it looked like an optical illusion. It looked like it went right through the hoop. Even when they showed the replay, I'm like, that's in. Then they showed the other replay. It actually hit the glass and then caught the net for that optical illusion. But 0 for 12 from downtown, and the Demon Deacons could start. They could smell it, the upset, and trying to get that win. And then it came down to this one possession game, and you got to give it up to me. I give it up to Roddy Gale. I mean, he hit the 3 to the first 3 of the second half for Michigan, and that ended up tying it up with 144 to go. And then Elliot Cadeau, who ends up making the game-winning free throw, he also had the game-tying layup when in the final seconds of regulation. And then Michigan had a nice defensive stand both at the end of regulation, where they dug in and stole the ball, at least knocked it away in regulation, and then kind of the same thing, bothered Wake Forest shot there at the end. 2 good defensive plays at the end of regulation, and to get it to OT, and then to win it and cling to the 1-point lead that way. So you look through some curious things that it was an overtime with 2 minutes to go in OT. It's tied at 84, and Dusty May takes Yaxel Lindenberg out and puts the freshman Trey McKinney in, and it was, I don't know, an offense for defense move for Dusty. I don't know if they drew it up because he didn't seem like he was the number 1 option. They went somewhere, but he ended up being wide open for a topside 3. Trey McKinney did, and man, he let it fly, and he did not end up making that one. But that was, I don't say curious, it was just interesting. You we talk so much about Yaks, and everybody talks about Yaks, and player of the year, and all Big Ten, preseason, all of these things, and Yaks, Michigan, they were clearly going to Ade Mara in the one possession game in regulation and in overtime. And when they didn't go to Mara, they also tried to post up Morez Johnson Jr. multiple times. One time he walked, another time it didn't work out for him. They did not run a set to get the ball to Lendenborg in overtime or late in this game. That's a little weird to me. I don't know. It'd be interesting what Dusty had to say about that. Now, if you recall watching the exhibition games against St. John's, that was a one possession game, and Cadeau was going to Mara and Johnson in that game, but he also at times went to Yaks, probably a matchup, whatever. I don't know if you call Yaks a decoy or whatever it was, or maybe it's the right hand. And he was 4 of 12 from the field. So they're like, let's ride the hot hand. And Mara and Morez Johnson are better post-up options than Lendenborg. Who knows? But all interesting to talk about. And we'll talk a lot about it. I think everyone will that watch this one over, the next couple days, if they're not doing it right now, sitting around on the computers or watching shows like this and, wondering about Yaks. And so, and wondering why they weren't going to them. I would imagine that would be the fine Michigan press corps will ask that question to Dusty, and we'll see how Dusty ends up, talking or what he has to say about that one. But in the end, we got Michigan coming up with winning basketball, going 2-0 now, getting that W over Wake Forest, not playing their best game, not really having anyone play their best game. Roddy Gale made some plays late, and with the exception of Ade Mara, who had a career day, no one else really, when you look at it. Let's go through those numbers, and maybe something will jump out over here talking about nobody had a good day and all these things. But, maybe when you start looking at the numbers, you say, oh, okay, yeah, what about that play? What about this play? There it is for Mara. His stat line, about as good as it gets, 18 and 13 with 6 feeds. And the big man's got a deft touch when it comes to passing the ball. You see it, whether it's it was like a hook shot alley-oop to Yaks one time. He found McKinney cutting back door another time in the first half. Dusty had said repeatedly before I had seen it that Mara is an exceptional passer, and you are seeing that. And for a big man who's got some post moves, he also obviously the block shots, but an exceptional passer. 8 of 11 from the field. And to go along with 18, 13, and 6, he also had 5 blocks and a steal. So maybe they're going to keep him around and he can sell popcorn at the Red Wings game coming up on Friday or something like that. But nice job by Ade Mara, who is the star of this game. He's Michigan's go-to guy early in the season. It's a bit of surprise if we were talking with the people, who's Michigan's most important player, who's Michigan's go-to player, who's Michigan's star. I think everybody would say Yaks first. I mean, prior to today, certainly prior to the season, you would say Yaks. You'd say Morez Johnson Jr. You'd say Elliot Cadeau, and maybe then you would start going to Mara, but he's been that was the way he played today was a little surprising just how much everything revolved around him. Now he was not only the hot hand, but you've seen a little bit of this from the exhibition season and in that first game against Oakland. But that's put it in the surprise category for sure. Cadeau, the point guard. Now, I thought heading into the season, the point guard's always going to be super important to any team. I put Lindenborg as their number one player, but I thought number two would be Cadeau. And he ends up with 17 points and 8 boards and 7 assists, and he makes the driving layup to tie the game in regulation, and then he hits the free throw, and he was 7-11 from the line. He hits the game-winning free throw, and yet he had the charge, threw another one away. I just would. Can you say with a 17, 8, and 7 game-tying layup, game-winning free throw that he left some out there, left some plays out there, can play better? They'll need him to play better. And that's the thing with this team. This is a team that has Final Four aspirations. So, the part about, it's early, or they're under the spotlight, everything, you're going to look at everything and say, you can't do that if you want to, win the Big Ten, or you can't do that if you want to make the Final Four. But here he did make some winning plays, and he ends up with good numbers, but he left a little bit out there. That's what I'd say for him. MJJ, Morez Johnson Jr., he was not part of the party in the first half where Michigan got up 13. He got into some foul trouble, and a pretty quiet game, even though he ends up with 10 points and 8 boards. This is about as quiet, I think, as you'll see from Johnson Jr. in foul trouble, and then also going to him. But he does get 2 steals. Surprised he didn't have. It seemed like he might have had a block or 2, but they don't have one recorded for him. Better game. I'm not worried about Morez Johnson Jr. He's going to be all right. And then there's Yaks, 9 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, 4 of 12 from the field, 1 of 7 from downtown, 33 minutes, had a block, had a steal, and had 3 turnovers. And then there was one time with him and Cadeau in overtime where Elliott's got the ball and he's throwing to Yaks about at midcourt, and Yaks wasn't paying attention. You don't like to see that, between those 2 players. Those are the kind of things that can cost you a game. Damari Burnett did not have it tonight. 0 of 3 from downtown, just 2 points, 2 boards, and an assist. And they're going to be games, like that for Burnett. And also, you think they're going to need him. Here's Gale, who had 0 turnovers. That's kind of a surprise to me. I mean, if you watched Roddy Gale, if we were, speculating on what kind of final line he would have, if you said, hey, he had 13 and 3 and he was 4 of 6, he's a good free throw shooter, you'd say, yeah, probably 2-3 turnovers. No turnovers for Gale. He had 2 steals. One of them was really big late in this game. And then he had the big 3, 1 of 3 from downtown, but it was the biggest 3 for Michigan of the game. Nice job for Roddy Gale. Trey McKinney, who knocked down 6 triples, a half dozen triples in the opener, was 0 of 4 from downtown. He'll have his ups and downs as the freshman, but he was first in off the bench. He came in a big spot with under 2 minutes in overtime for Lindenborg, and they went to him for a 3-pointer. So it's not like they're spoon feeding him or slow playing him. He's there. They're counting on him, and he ends up with 8 points and 3 boards and an assist on 2 of 6 shooting. He does drain all 4 of his free throws. LJ Kaysen, it was good to see him back. He had 8 points, 3 boards, and 2 assists, and 14 minutes of play. Also had a steal. You're going to see more of LJ. They're going to need him. I mean, he could be along with Trey. Whether you want to say backup point guard, certainly one of their key ball handlers, and he can also take anyone in the country off the dribble and get his own shot. He's physical that way. He's got that kind of build, and I think it's been an ankle injury that he had been dealing with, so I think he's only going to get better. Cheddar was the disappointment tonight. Picked up a couple fouls, just had one shot, but nothing but goose eggs for Cheddar. Other than that, I guess the numbers that we want to look at, while I could still put them up there, would be the team numbers for Michigan. What did they end up shooting? They are going 28, 4 of 25 from downtown. So that's the key number I think we're looking at. They only made 1 3 in the second half, and that 3 was by Gale, who knocked that big one down in regulation. Just checking the numbers, make sure I have them all here for you. 4 of 25. That's the 3-point percentage for Michigan. You look at that. If you said they were up 13 and then went 0 of 12 in the second half from downtown, they were going to be in a fight, and they were, because of that. There's a lot of different things you could look at, but that to me would be the number one thing, going ice cold from downtown. That gave life to the Demon Deacons, who took it and made it a game and almost pulled the upset, with Michigan being a 14.5-point favorite. So there you go. Let's take a look at some of the feedback in this one. I'm going to say that we probably have some from the people. We usually do, even on some of the late games. We have them. Let's see where we are at when it came down to it. Dave says it was a pretty hard to watch, that second half, and even the OT fundamentals. Yeah. Well, Dave, if Wake hits a shot there at the end of regulation and of overtime, this is a completely different discussion. And everyone feels differently about it. Everyone looking at this team differently, but that's where we're at. Sometimes you survive a game like this, and then it becomes one of these, like, wow, they've got a lot to learn. And, this was a good, of course, a learning game for them, an opportunity to good experience being in this type of game. When you win, you lose, and you're like, this team needs to work on everything. They got to execute. And the thing is, they've got so many new players and so many different transfers. I could even feel it in the second half. They're trying to figure out who plays best with one another, and they're just all trying to gel on the fly. There's a lot of teams that are in this their boat. I'm not making any excuses for them or anything. That's just part of the process that you're going to have to go through as you watch this team. But it makes all the difference in the world when you come away and they're 2-0, and you can work in practice and all those things, and whether it would be on the other side for the fans, I think, and for the coaches. Matthew says people don't understand that was a very good and experienced Wake Forest team. I knew from the start it would be close. Well, Michigan, and there were some arguments I saw over on, during the games over on the Maize and Blue Review. They have a game thread, that people, as they watch the game, will say things. And there were some folks that didn't think it was a good idea to play Wake Forest down at the Little Caesars Arena, and, not having them in Ann Arbor. And, I get that point. You want to play all your games at home, but also, you're thinking through things when you go through the schedule. And this was one of those where they're playing an ACC team. They're playing them last year. They played them in Greensboro, So they weren't playing them at Wake Forest, but they were playing them essentially. It was a true road game, but that was a home game for Wake, and so the same thing here. And the one thing, I don't know if you think about it, again, it's a fair point. You want all the games in Ann Arbor, but there's a lot of kids. There's a lot of people that will make a trip to Little Caesars Arena and will not make the trip all the way to Ann Arbor. And so when it comes to playing in Detroit, recruiting, that's one of the big things. And, the fans, you get a lot of Michigan fans there. It's probably, how many people are traveling for Wake Forest? I mean, that's 95% Michigan crowd. No, you don't have the students and, the students and the Maze Rage, that is a big deal, but it's recruiting. And is one of the big reasons that you have a game like this where you're right in town, and you get all of the TV stations down there and everything there. So that's what's going on there. As far as Wake Forest being an experienced team and all that, yeah, they did a really good job in the second half. Colvin, the transfer from for Purdue. You may go all year long, and if we had top 10 dunks of the year again from Michigan's opponents, let's put Colvin in there, because right now, that's the leader in the clubhouse. But that would probably end up and stay in the top 10. But the way they were able to stay in this game is, they shot the ball well, 10 of 34 from downtown. But you could see, when they got in the groove and Michigan went cold, they were going to defend, and they're not complete chump change. So this part about people don't understand. I don't know. Maybe Vegas doesn't understand, because Vegas had Michigan as a big fat 14.5-point favorite when it came down to it. So that's it from me. I see that we got Michigan. And let's look at the upcoming schedule and a couple other things. I do have some other things for you. I was going to say, see you later. That's it. But I've got more. I got a couple other things that I wanted to say to you, that you got Michigan moving up to number 6 today in the top 25. And looking at the numbers heading into this game, Ken Pom had Michigan at number 10 overall. And let's look at that upcoming schedule, and that is brought to you by the very feed that you're watching or listening to right now, the Maize and Blue Review. And we are getting, we're 16 days away from Thanksgiving. Maybe you already are thinking, or maybe it's your girlfriend or wife is already thinking about the holidays. Why not give yourself or that fan in your life the gift of the Maize and Blue Review? Go to on3.com and hit that subscribe button. That schedule, Michigan now coming up pretty quick. 2 games this week. They are heading down to take on Sunny Dykes. No, they'll go down to Texas and Dallas, and they will be at TCU coming up Friday. A late Friday night game on ESPN2, Michigan at Texas Christian. That's the next game. And then following that, it's Middle Tennessee State. Midweek, a week from tomorrow, they will be taking on Middle Tennessee State. So those are the 2 upcoming games to think about. We'll be here Friday night late. We'll also be on this very feed tomorrow at 2:00 and Friday talking basketball and talking football. Football's still going on. Michigan's got a big game coming up on Saturday at a baseball stadium in Chicago. That's going to do it here. Thanks for everybody for tuning in, watching, your feedback. And Michigan survives in overtime, 85-84. They are 2-0. And we'll see you over on the Maize and Blue Review. Have a great night.